What's up, everyone? This is Xavier, your host, and welcome to the 210 Stockyard. If you guys didn't hear, the first round of cuts just happened on Saturday, January 21st. So, the XFL's communication department released this tweet stating that the teams are now set to 70 players. And in fact, what they didn't tell you was that the teams were forced to cut down to 70 players, and that's just the first wave of cuts. So each team still has to make an additional 20 cuts before week 1, so before the season starts. So that is a total of 160 more players that need to still be released. Now, what caught my eye was that out of the players that have already been released, 23 of them were all graduates of the NFL Alumni Academy, which is a very prestigious group to belong to, because if you were a grad from the Alumni Academy, you were guaranteed a roster spot on an XFL team. Doesn't necessarily mean that you were going to get a contract, but you were at least assigned to a team and placed on the training camp roster for a chance to make the team. So if you didn't know, or if you haven't heard of the NFL's Alumni Academy, let me just give you some quick bullet points on it. That way you can understand the relevance or the significance of it and why seeing 23 players being cut caught my eye. So 1, the NFL Academy is comprised of NFL practice squad guys that never made the team, or undrafted free agents, obviously, that never got drafted. Now, if you graduate the academy, you are supposed to be guaranteed a roster spot in the XFL. Now, I know that doesn't mean you're getting a contract, but again, you were supposed to have been funneled to and assigned to an XFL team for further evaluation and hopefully playing time. 2, the Academy is an invite-only program. You just don't decide you want to go or apply to go. You have to be asked to go. So they have to see something in you to want to develop you and continue your career. 3, it's ran by former NFL coaches and NFL players. So people that have already been through the whole ringer, that have been through the process and know the league. 4, this one was a little interesting too. There's no salary for any players that attend the NFL's Alumni Academy. So these guys aren't making money while they're there. It's just literally players that are dedicated to furthering their NFL career or attempting to further their NFL career. 5, I said this before, now that the NFL has partnered with the XFL, the Alumni Academy is even more of an evaluation league now. So this is where players go to be evaluated to hopefully get picked up by NFL teams when they call. 6, the Academy and the XFL have decided to group and partner with sports science to help develop and implement any type of new equipment, rules, or procedures, again, like I said, in sports science, data analytics, or digital analysis that are going to help not just the league, but players as well. 7, the alumni's goal is to develop NFL-ready players. They want to keep players in peak condition in preparation of a potential in-season signing, meaning injuries. So, of course, injuries, unfortunately, are a frequent part of the NFL season. Players get injured all the time. So when that happens, other than teams' practice squads, this is another area or another avenue for them to explore to possibly call up players to fill up slots for injured players. So that's why it caught my eye to see 23 alumni grads being cut from teams, especially on the first wave, because these guys are supposed to kind of be, cream of the crop. Again, it's invite only, it's a developmental league. Like, these are guys that are just shy of making an NFL roster but couldn't quite make it. So they just needed that little bit of extra, not motivation, but just development to get there. And seeing them cut in the first wave of cuts, I don't know what that says about the XFL or what it says about the players. But let's get into each team's cuts and let's see what they're doing in the first wave. First up, we have the Arlington Renegades. So they cut 4 players, so not a whole lot. And out of the 4, though, 2 of them were NFL Academy alumni. They got rid of a wide receiver, an offensive lineman, defensive lineman, and a DB. So, interesting fact with the Renegades, I honestly expected them to cut a little bit more than that, especially in the wide receiver area, because they had or still have a 10-man wide receiver room. So I really don't know if they're planning on keeping that many players occupying spots on the roster. I don't know if they're just that much talent that they're having a hard time deciding, or maybe it's the opposite, that they don't have a lot of talent and they're not sure who to pick. But another interesting fact is they still have 72 players on their roster, so I don't know if they're going to get penalized at all, or as long as they make the final cut before week 1 if they're safe. Now, one last piece of information regarding the Renegades is, I love what they're doing here, by the way. So on their official Twitter, they announced that they're going to have an open practice event January 28th. So I just might make the drive up to Arlington to catch this. But it's free admission, free parking. You can watch the practice, get that stadium experience. And I love that they're doing this. It helps with ticket sales. You can pick your season seats while you're there. So go ahead and look around the stadium, find a seat you like, and you can purchase season tickets, and I'm assuming single game tickets as well. And of course, after the practice, you can meet the coach and players, and I think that's just awesome. I wish every team would do this. Next up, the Houston Roughnecks. So they made a total of 8 cuts, of which 4 were NFL Academy alumni. So they released an offensive lineman, 2 wide receivers, 2 linebackers, and 3 DBs. So I'm seeing more on the defensive end with Houston. Again, I'm always curious with cuts, so does that mean they don't have a good defense, or they have a good enough defense with who they had that they felt comfortable releasing the players that they released? I don't know. We'll see. Now, the interesting note about these cuts is, yes, they cut 8 players, but they are also adding players. One in specific was Nick Hawley, the hybrid running back wide receiver from the 2020 season. So he was a fan favorite there in Houston, and he was actually a pretty good player. Well, he's back, so the Houston Roughneck fans can, I guess, celebrate that you get to see Nick Hawley again. Next up, we have my San Antonio Brahmas, who did make some moves. So they cut a total of 7 players, of which 5 were NFL Academy alumni, so that is a little bit surprising for me. They got rid of a quarterback, a running back, a wide receiver, 2 wide receivers, a tight end, an offensive lineman, and a defensive lineman. So just to me, that looks like they're just kind of trimming the fat for each skill position. Now, out of the players that we released, the one that hurt me the most, or I'm going to say hurt me the most, was getting rid of Anthony Russo. So he was one of the 2 original quarterbacks, or I'm sorry, actually they were the first 2 players that the Brahmas selected back in the NFL draft during the quarterback selection. So Jawan Pass was first. Here, there he is. You can see him behind Anthony Russo. Anthony Russo was second. And even though Russo wasn't expected to be our starter, I kind of grew attached to him just because of his presence on social media. This guy would post all the time. He was most spirited about the team, I think. But again, they released him. And I don't think they released him because of an attitude or even skill set. Unfortunately, he just didn't have the skill set to compete with who they added. So the Brahmas added both Reed Sinnott and Jack Cohen. So if you're unfamiliar with them, I will make a separate video kind of breaking them down. But it's because we added these 2 guys is the reason why I believe they got rid of Russo. And I think, in fact, and most people online are saying this too, that Reed Sinnott may end up taking over QB1 from Jawan Pass. But we'll see. Again, that's a whole nother video. But again, I'm still a little disappointed, a little hurt that we got rid of Anthony Russo, especially with how involved he was with the team. But best of luck to you, brother. I do hope you find your spot somewhere. Next up, we have the Orlando Guardians. They released a total of 6 players. 2 of them belong to the academy. They got rid of a quarterback, wide receiver, 2 tight ends, an offensive lineman, and a defensive lineman. Interesting thing about the Guardians is they were experimenting with arena players. So 3 of the players that they let go were actually a part of the fan-controlled football league. It's the league that allowed fans to kind of call the plays via an app. So they were experimenting with arena players again. Maybe they were hoping to find the next Kurt Warner. Who knows? But those are the moves that the Guardians made. Next up, the St. Louis Battlehawks. So they cut a total of 5 players, 2 being Academy alumni. They got rid of a running back, wide receiver, an offensive lineman, and 2 DBs. So an interesting, I guess, standout player among the release players was Darius Bradwell. You might recognize him from Hard Knocks. He was on the season where the Chargers and the Rams had to share that season. That was kind of weird. but he was the undrafted running back that had gained weight, and there was a conversation between him and one of the coaches where he was actually being kind of scolded for how much weight that he had gained. But he didn't make the Chargers team, and well, here he is now. He didn't make the Battlehawks team, so we'll see what happens with him. All right, now the DC Defenders. So they cut 6 players, 4 of which were NFL Academy alumni. They got rid of 2 offensive linemen, a running back, a tight end, a DB, and their punter. The punter was actually selected in the November draft, and so I guess he didn't make the team. Now, the DC Defenders caught my eye, not because of who they let go, but because of who they added. They added Rod Taylor Jr. Now, if you don't know, this guy is actually permanently banned from the NFL. He had 3 suspensions, all of them having to do with PEDs, performance-enhancing drugs. So this guy has already been in trouble multiple times with the league and is permanently banned from the league. So I'm just a little curious as to why the Defenders picked him up and what the plan for him is. Because again, if you're in the XFL, the thought process or the understanding is that you're attempting to eventually make it to the NFL. And being that he is banned, I'm assuming he's just going to be an XFL player for the remainder of his career. I'm not sure, but again, that was a very interesting pickup. So, I mean, I'm not trying to down the guy or anything. It was just a little surprising to see that they picked up someone that was banned from the NFL. Moving on, we have the Las Vegas Vipers, who seem to always be late to the party. They only released 2 players, so they cut their running back, Matt Jones. They picked him up in the November draft. His most recent action was actually with the Battlehawks in the 2020 season. And if you didn't know, he was also a 3rd-round pick by the then Washington Redskins. But again, he was released. And they also released wide receiver Isaiah Macklin. He was their 7th-round pick in the November draft, 53rd overall. So he as well didn't make the team. And last but not least, the Seattle Sea Dragons. So they cut a total of 6 players, 4 of which were NFL alumni graduates. They got rid of a quarterback, running back, wide receiver, an offensive lineman, and 2 defensive linemen. So just, to me, all-around standard cuts there. Now, there's another interesting team, or another interesting fact with the team. And again, it's not who they cut, but for me, it's who they added. So they picked up quarterback Harrison Frost. So if you don't know, or if you haven't heard of Harrison Frost, don't feel bad. I didn't know who he is either, and in fact, I had to look him up too. So he just graduated from the University of Western Georgia and declared for the 2023 NFL Draft. So this is why I find it interesting, because someone who's just graduated and declares for the draft can still enter into a contract with the XFL, being that it's a developmental league. So again, he's supposed to go, or he is going into the draft, but I believe he was ranked very low. So among quarterbacks going into the draft, I think he ranks like 50 or 52nd. So someone like that more than likely is going to go undrafted and may bounce around between practice squads, and you have a harder time making a team. So I love that the XFL provides an opportunity for guys like Harrison Frost to kind of increase their draft stock before draft day. So who knows, maybe he does stay with the team, maybe he makes the team, even plays, gets some film or some highlight film up, and maybe we'll see him in a higher round in the draft. Who knows? I'm definitely curious to see what happens with him, and I'm really curious to see how many other college players do this, kind of take this route. After college, you play in the XFL to try to increase your draft stock and then go to the NFL. That's kind of a cool pathway to take, I think. But that was the breakdown for today. So again, teams are making draft cuts. We still have more cuts to make. Your thoughts, what do you guys think? Please like and subscribe if you're enjoying the content, and definitely leave comments on this. I'd love to know what you guys think about these cuts and additions, the Alumni Academy, and just your thoughts on college players entering in the XFL. Again, I think it's a very interesting pathway to take. I like the idea that they can do that. I'd love to hear what you guys think. But stay tuned for another episode of the 210 Stockyard.